somebody asked you this question, how would you respond? Right, you're going into to have a conversation that might be a little bit difficult. How do you feel? What are you thinking about? And as you can imagine, my guess is these are some of the words that came to mind for you. What we hear from many of our clients is, it makes me nervous. I have sweaty palms, tend to avoid it, feel a little guilty because I don't want to share bad news. I had a client say, I'd rather go to a root canal than have a difficult conversation. It feels quite uncomfortable. When we look at those words, most of those are about us, how we feel. And my hope is by the end of our time together, you shift again your mindset a bit, that when you think of difficult conversations, potentially you think about it from this perspective. When I engage in this conversation, might I be really helping the other person in some way? Might I be benefiting them, the team, the organization in some way? Maybe they'll see it as a gift. Maybe it'll help us work as a team a bit differently. This is this idea of acknowledgement. Sometimes when I engage in difficult conversations, I acknowledge the other person and I acknowledge our differences. There's a degree of transparency involved as well. So my hope is, again, that not only, yes, we'll share some best practices, we'll share some thoughts. My hope is you'll also start to look at the idea of having these conversations. You look at it a bit differently. I'll also ask of a lot of our clients these two questions. When you think about difficult conversations, what makes you most nervous? And then what gets in the way of you engaging in these difficult conversations? And I'll start with the second question first. One of the biggest barriers I hear clients talk about is, well, I don't have time. I have these conversations that I need to have, but I don't have time to have them. To me, that's the fake reason. I think that's the reason we give ourselves, to let ourselves off the hook. But if we really think about, well, what are the things that make you the most nervous? And we start to dig into that. These are the ones, again, top 3 that I typically hear from our clients. And I wonder, when you think about this for yourself, what are the things that get in the way of you having these difficult conversations? And if you hear yourself saying time, I'm going to challenge that a bit. Might you be a bit uncomfortable with, what if they, get emotional? What if they get angry? And are we uncomfortable with the potential emotional response from the other person? That's one of the top answers I hear. Another response that I hear is this idea of, we get along really well. If I share uncomfortable news, if I give them feedback, or if I engage in this conversation where I don't agree with them, is it going to put a bit of a ding in our relationship? And I'm not ready to change or lose that relationship. And the third is, especially with what's going on in the world today, the great resignation, the great reshuffle, if I have this difficult conversation with them, especially if it's around feedback, what could the consequences be? Might they choose to not want to work with me anymore? Might they choose to leave the team or the organization? I don't know if I'm ready for that. So these, again, my belief is these are some of the top reasons why we avoid having these difficult conversations. And if we really take a look at these 3, they're all about us. So if we think about difficult conversations through the lens of the other person, and looking at it from, this is a way for me to help them do their job better. It's a way for me to advance their skill set in some way. It's a way for me to help them see how they're impacting others. My bet is we'd be much more likely to engage in these kinds of conversations. I think what we hope happens is when we have a difficult conversation on our plate, something happens, we need to give feedback to someone, or we disagree with someone, and we think, I don't want to deal with the emotional response, the loss of the relationship, the fear of consequences. So I'm going to kind of push it underground and hope that it stays there.